The storm hit just after midnight, shaking the windows as Emma woke to the sound of her father's voice drifting down the hall. It wasn't the words that froze her. It was the fear in them. Daniel never sounded afraid. She sat up, hearing him whisper, "You can't call me here. Not now." Who was on the other end of that call? And why did he sound like a man with something to lose? Emma crept to the doorway, her heart pounding as she peeked into the dim kitchen. Daniel stood with his back turned, clutching a small metal key she had never seen before. How long had he been living two lives under one roof? And what was he hiding that could shatter everything they believed about him? When he suddenly slammed the phone down and whispered, "It's starting again," Emma stumbled backward, knocking over a glass. Daniel spun around, startled. But instead of yelling, he slipped the key into his pocket and said, almost pleading, "Go back to bed, Emma. Please." Something in his voice told her the night wasn't done with them yet. Emma lay awake long after Daniel returned to his room. The storm quieted, but her thoughts only grew louder. She kept replaying the moment he whispered, "It's starting again," as if it were a warning meant for someone else. But she heard it. Morning arrived with a cold, gray light cutting through her curtain. She walked into the kitchen, pretending nothing was wrong, though her eyes darted to the counter where the glass had shattered hours earlier. Daniel stood by the coffee maker, his back stiff, as if bracing for a question he hoped wouldn't come. When he finally turned, his eyes flickered with the same tension she'd heard in his voice the night before. "Row night?" he asked, trying too hard to sound casual. Emma nodded slowly, searching his face for truth, but he avoided her gaze. As she poured herself coffee, she noticed something missing from the hook by the door. Daniel's usual key ring. The small metal key hadn't been the only thing he'd taken. Emma tried to act normal through breakfast, but every word Daniel spoke sounded rehearsed. He lingered over the same mug of coffee, barely drinking it, checking the clock more than he ever did on a weekend. Laura breezed into the kitchen humming, unaware of the tension tightening the air. She kissed Daniel's cheek, though he barely reacted, and Emma caught the faint confusion in her mother's eyes. When Laura stepped out to grab laundry, Emma seized the moment. "Dad," she said softly, "who called last night?" Daniel froze. The silence stretched long enough to carve a line between them. His smile came late. Too late. Too late. "Wrong number," he said, his tone too gentle, too prepared. Emma felt the lie land heavily in her chest. If he could lie that easily, what else had he lied about? When Laura returned, Daniel grabbed his coat. "I need to run an errand," he said. But Emma saw it. His coat pocket sagged with the weight of that same metal key. Emma watched Daniel leave the house with the same unsettled feeling that had haunted her since the storm. She waited until his car disappeared around the corner before grabbing her hoodie and rushing outside. The cold air stung her cheeks, but her mind raced faster than her feet. She trailed along the sidewalk, keeping distance as she followed his car's path toward the older part of town. Daniel rarely went there. Almost never. When she reached the intersection, she spotted his car parked behind an abandoned hardware store. Her pulse hit her throat. Why here? She hid behind a rusted dumpster, peeking out as Daniel stepped from the car. He scanned the area, then reached into his pocket to pull out the same metal key. Emma held her breath. What did that key open? And why choose a place no one ever visits? Daniel approached a side door with peeling paint, slipped the key into the lock, and disappeared inside. Emma's heartbeat hammered so loudly she was sure someone could hear it. She waited only a few seconds after the door closed before creeping forward, drawn by a pull she couldn't resist. Her fingers brushed the cold metal handle and she pressed her ear to the door. Nothing. Just silence. Thick, intentional silence. She tried the knob, but it didn't budge. Whatever her father was hiding, it was meant to stay hidden. She stepped back, frustration twisting her stomach, until she noticed something near the door frame. A small scrape on the ground, fresh, as if something heavy had been dragged inside recently. Her breath hitched. What was Daniel moving around in a place like this? Before she could think further, footsteps echoed faintly from deep inside the building. Emma froze. She pressed herself flat against the wall, terrified Daniel might emerge and catch her. But the footsteps faded, replaced by a sound even worse. A muffled voice that wasn't his. Emma couldn't shake the sound of that unfamiliar voice behind the door. All night, the echo of it gnawed at her. Was Daniel meeting someone? Hiding someone? The next morning, she walked through the house as though the walls themselves were holding secrets. Daniel acted normal. Too normal. Humming while packing his lunch, avoiding eye contact. Laura chatted cheerfully at the table, but Emma noticed the way she kept glancing at Daniel with puzzled eyes, sensing tension but not knowing its shape. When Daniel left for work, Emma waited only minutes before grabbing her bag. She wasn't going to let the truth slip away again. She drove toward the old part of town, her grip tight on the steering wheel as she replayed the scrape marks outside that door. When she reached the building, she got out of the car and approached slowly, but this time, the door wasn't closed. It hung slightly open, as if someone left in a hurry. And Emma felt the dread rise in her throat. Emma pushed the door gently, half expecting someone to rush out. But the inside was empty, quiet in a way that felt forced. Dust coated the corners, yet footprints disrupted the layer, traced in hurried patterns toward a back room. Her breath shallowed as she stepped inside. The air was cold, metallic. A faint smell of old paper hung in the space. When she reached the back room, she found something that stopped her heart. A table covered in photographs. Some were of Daniel. Others were of places she recognized: her school, their house, the grocery store they visited weekly. Someone had been watching them, studying them. Her hands trembled as she sifted through the images, looking for answers she didn't want. Then she found a photo of herself from 3 days ago, walking home, unaware she was being followed. A chill ran through her. Whoever took these pictures wasn't just observing Daniel. They were tracking her too. Emma's pulse hammered as she grabbed the photographs and stuffed them into her bag. She needed answers. Now. She hurried outside, the cold wind hitting her like a slap. As she rounded the corner toward her car, she stopped short. A man she had never seen before leaned against the hood, arms crossed, gaze locked on her as though he'd been expecting her. He looked older, deliberate, dangerous. "You shouldn't be here," he said calmly, as if they were old acquaintances. She stepped back, her heart racing, but he didn't move toward her. "I'm Mark," he said. "Mark Ashford. Your father knows me." The name meant nothing, yet something in his voice chilled her. "Leave me alone," she snapped, but he only sighed. "If you keep digging," he warned, "you won't like what you find, and neither will he." Emma got into her car without another word, hands shaking. But fear wasn't enough to stop her. Not now. Emma drove straight home, her mind spinning with fear and disbelief. The photos in her bag felt like burning coals, each one a question she wasn't ready to answer. She burst into her room and dumped them onto her bed. They looked even worse in the calm light of home. Daniel in random locations, Emma walking alone, Laura stepping out of the grocery store. Who was tracking their family? And why? When she heard the front door open, she shoved the photos under her pillow. Daniel called for her, sounding unusually cheerful. But when she stepped into the hallway, that fake brightness faded. He stared at her too long, as if studying her expression. "Everything okay?" he asked. Emma swallowed hard. "Fine." The lie tasted bitter. Daniel nodded slowly, but his eyes lingered on her bag, almost like he knew what she had found, or feared she had found it. Emma waited until dinner to test her father. Laura prepared pasta while the tension simmered, like something cooking too long on the stove. Daniel joined them at the table, acting relaxed, but Emma saw the tightness behind his smile. She pushed a fork through her food, pretending to be casual. "Dad," she said lightly, "have you ever been to that old hardware store near Oak Street?" Daniel stiffened, just a fraction. But enough. No, he said quickly. Too quickly. Laura glanced at him, confused. Emma leaned back, watching him with new eyes. If he could lie without blinking, what else was he hiding? She wanted to press harder, but Laura's presence held her back. Instead, she simply said, "Strange. I thought I saw your car there." Daniel froze for just a breath before taking another bite. The air grew thick. Emma felt the shift. He knew she was getting closer, and he was scared. Emma barely slept. Every shadow felt like a threat, every creak like someone watching her. Morning came slow and unwelcome. As she stepped outside to clear her head, her pulse jolted. Mark Ashford stood across the street, leaning against a lamppost like he had all the time in the world. She froze, gripping the strap of her bag, but he didn't move toward her. He simply watched, assessing her like she was a problem he needed to measure before solving. When she finally approached, he pushed off the post and said, "You didn't listen." Emma fought the urge to step back. "Why were you watching my family?" she demanded. Mark's expression remained unreadable. "Not watching," he corrected, "protecting. Your father isn't who you think he is." The words dropped like a stone in her stomach. "Then who is he?" she whispered. Mark hesitated just long enough to terrify her. "Ask him," he said softly. "Before someone else does." Emma tried to walk away from Mark, but his words clung to her like burrs. Protecting? From what? Or who? She hurried down the sidewalk, but Mark followed at a slow, deliberate pace, as if he knew she'd eventually stop running from the truth. She finally turned sharply. "What do you want from me?" she snapped. Mark's expression softened, not with kindness, but with something like regret. "Your father made choices long before you were born," he said. "Choices that don't stay buried." Emma felt her chest tighten. "Tell me what he did." Mark shook his head. "Not my story to tell." His voice dropped lower. "But you're in danger now. And if Daniel won't tell you the truth, you need to find it yourself." Emma swallowed hard. A part of her wanted to scream at him, demand answers, but she could see it, the fear hiding behind his calm. Whatever Daniel was part of, it wasn't small. Emma hurried home, each step feeling heavier than the last. She slammed her door behind her, hoping the world, Mark, the abandoned building, the photos, would stay outside. But Laura stood in the hallway, arms folded, worry etched across her expression. "Emma, what's going on?" she asked gently. Emma hesitated. How could she explain something she barely understood? "Just stress," she said. But Laura didn't believe it for a second. She stepped forward and placed a hand on Emma's arm. "Is this about your father?" The question hit too close. Emma's breath stuttered. "Mom, do you ever feel like he's hiding something?" The silence that followed was not confusion. It was recognition. Laura's eyes flickered with something Emma had never seen before. Fear. "Go to your room," Laura whispered. "Please." Emma froze. "Mom?" But Laura shook her head, stepping back like someone bracing for a truth she'd been avoiding for years. The rest of the afternoon passed with a heavy stillness. Emma sat on her bed, staring at the photos she had hidden under the pillow. Every image felt like a puzzle piece she didn't know how to arrange. When she finally stepped into the hallway again, the house was quiet, too quiet. She wandered toward her parents' room, drawn by a feeling she couldn't explain. The door was cracked open. Inside, she saw Laura sitting on the edge of the bed, holding Daniel's old briefcase, the one he never let anyone touch. Emma stepped inside slowly. "Mom, what are you doing?" Laura looked up with haunted eyes. "I should have checked this years ago." She opened the case. Emma leaned in, breath trembling. Inside were documents, old IDs with Daniel's face but different names, places he'd never mentioned. dates that didn't align with anything she knew about him. Emma whispered, "Who is he?" Laura didn't answer. She couldn't. Emma and Laura didn't speak at first. Words felt useless against the storm of questions filling the room. Finally, Laura closed the briefcase with a soft click that sounded far too loud in the stillness. "Your father promised me," she whispered. "Promised he'd never be part of that world again." Emma's heart hammered. What world? Laura wiped at her eyes. People he worked with. People who don't let go. Emma's stomach tightened. She thought of Mark, the abandoned building, the photographs. "Mom, we need to ask him." Laura shook her head sharply. "No! If he thinks we know, it could make things worse." Emma felt anger rise. "We're already in danger. Someone is watching us." Laura closed her eyes, pain painting her expression. "Then we need to be careful," she whispered. But Emma wasn't thinking about caution anymore. She was thinking about the truth, and the truth was waiting somewhere. Her father never wanted her to go. Emma didn't wait for nightfall this time. She drove straight to the apartment address she found on one of Daniel's old IDs, her hands trembling as she clutched the steering wheel. The building looked normal. Too normal for something tied to a secret life. The hallway smelled faintly of old carpet and coffee as she knocked on the door. Silence followed, and for a moment she thought she had the wrong place, until the lock clicked. A woman opened the door, just enough to see Emma's face. She was young, maybe late 20s, with tired eyes that flickered with recognition. "You're Daniel's daughter," she said quietly, not as a question but as a fact. Emma's pulse jumped. "Who are you?" The woman opened the door fully. "I'm Sophie," she said. "Sophie Hale. And your father wasn't supposed to bring his family into this." Emma stepped inside, breath catching as she realized Sophie wasn't surprised to see her at all. Sophie led Emma into a modest, quiet apartment. The living room held few decorations, just stacks of folders, notebooks, and a single framed photo of Daniel, younger, smiling in a way Emma had never seen. Her breath hitched. "Why do you have that?" she whispered. Sophie sat on the edge of a chair, folding her hands. "Because he saved my life," she said simply. "Years ago." Emma frowned. "Saved you from what?" Sophie hesitated, staring down at her hands as if the answer might burn. "From the people he used to work for, people he walked away from, but walking away doesn't erase debts." Emma felt the room tilt slightly. "My dad isn't an insurance investigator, is he?" Sophie shook her head. "No, that was the lie he built to keep your family safe." Emma stepped back, her voice shaking. "Safe from what?" Sophie's eyes lifted, filled with quiet sorrow. "From the world he left behind, and the enemies waiting for him to slip." Emma sank onto the couch, her head spinning. Sophie watched her with careful patience. "You said he left that world," Emma murmured. "So why now? Why is everything happening again?" Sophie leaned forward. "Because someone resurfaced. Someone your father crossed." Emma swallowed hard. "Mark?" Sophie nodded slowly. "Mark Ashford wasn't always on your father's side. They were partners once, before Daniel walked away." Emma's pulse thudded in her ears. So Mark's warning, was it real? Sophie's expression tightened. "Real enough, but he's not the only one watching." She stood and retrieved a thin folder from her desk. "Your father created new identities for himself. Several, but one of them was compromised last month. That's why he's been disappearing." Emma opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were photos, documents, timelines, proof. "Why tell me this?" she whispered. Sophie exhaled. "Because you deserve the truth, and because they may come for you next. North, nas work nest, us." Emma closed the folder slowly, her hands shaking. Whatever fire Daniel had run from, it still burned. "Why didn't he tell us?" she asked. Sophie's expression softened. Because he didn't want you to live in fear? Emma stood abruptly. Too late for that. She moved toward the window, staring down at the street below. Her mind raced with memories of Daniel. Every smile, every quiet moment. Were they all built on lies? There's more you need to see, Sophie said gently. She walked to a small drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. Emma hesitated before taking it. Daniel's handwriting stretched across the front. For Emma. Only if necessary. Her breath caught. He left this for me, Sophie nodded. He hoped he'd never need it. Emma carefully tore the envelope open. Inside was a short letter and an address scribbled in the corner, somewhere she had never heard of. And beneath it, a single sentence that chilled her. If they find you, don't trust anyone. Emma read the letter once, twice, 3 times, her heartbeat climbing with every line. Daniel had known this day might come, known that someone would return for him, and now for her. When she finished reading, her hands fell to her sides. Why didn't he warn us? She whispered. Sophie exhaled slowly, because he thought running would be enough. Emma turned toward the door, determination hardening her fear. I need to confront him. Sophie stepped forward quickly. Emma, don't. If Daniel sees that letter, he'll know everything's unraveling, and that could push him into running again, or worse. Emma shook her head. I can't keep living in the dark. She grabbed her bag and moved toward the exit. Sophie didn't stop her, but her voice followed in a whisper heavy with sorrow. Be careful. Once you open this door, there's no going back. Emma paused only a moment before stepping out, her father's world closing in on her like a rising storm. Emma drove home with the letter still burning in her pocket. Every streetlight felt like an accusation. When she stepped through the front door, Daniel stood in the living room, arms crossed, eyes sharp, not angry, but alert, like someone expecting trouble. Where were you? He asked, voice too calm. Emma swallowed. This was her moment. Why didn't you tell us? She whispered. Daniel's expression flickered. Fear, guilt, something deeper. Tell you what? He asked, but the question came too fast. Emma pulled the folded letter from her pocket. Daniel froze as if the world stopped breathing. You weren't supposed to find that, he whispered. Not yet. Emma felt her chest tighten. Dad, who's coming after us? For the first time, Daniel didn't have a lie ready. He looked away, shoulders sinking. Someone I crossed a long time ago. Someone who doesn't forgive. Emma stepped closer. And now they're coming for me too. Daniel didn't deny it. Daniel motioned for Emma to sit, but she couldn't. Her nerves felt too sharp, too exposed. Tell me everything, she said. Daniel rubbed his hands together, the way he always did when he was cornered. Before I met your mother, I worked for people who dealt in information. Sensitive information. I was good at it. Too good. Emma's pulse drummed. You were a spy. Daniel shook his head. Not officially, but close. He paced the room, voice low. I tried to leave. They don't let people leave. Emma felt a chill crawl up her spine. So you changed your name, started over. Daniel nodded. I built a life that felt real, a life I wanted. His voice cracked. But I always knew it might catch up. Emma took a shaky breath. And Mark? Daniel stopped pacing. He was my partner. Until he became something else. Emma felt the world tilt. So he's not warning us. He's part of it. Daniel closed his eyes. He's the one who wants leverage, and he thinks that leverage is you. Emma stared at Daniel, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. Why didn't you tell us? She whispered. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Because knowing would make you a target. Emma shook her head. I'm already a target. Daniel flinched. She stepped closer. Dad, someone's been watching us. There were photos of me, his face drained of color. Where? he demanded. Emma hesitated. In the building behind the old hardware store, Daniel's reaction wasn't shock. It was dread. That place. I thought they abandoned it. His hands trembled as he sat down. They're closer than I realized. Emma felt fear rise, sharp and cold. What do they want? Daniel looked at her, eyes hollow. Mutt, they'll use you to get to me. Emma stepped back, her breath shaky. Then, we go to the police. Daniel stood abruptly. No, you don't understand. The people after me aren't scared of the police. He paused. They own them. The front door slammed open. Emma jumped. Daniel surged to his feet, instincts snapping into place like a man returning to an old life. But it was only Laura, carrying groceries and wearing a smile that faded the moment she saw their faces. What happened? She asked, voice trembling slightly. Daniel stepped forward, trying to recover. Nothing. Everything's fine. But Laura saw through him instantly. Daniel, please don't lie. Emma met her mother's eyes. Mom, we need to talk. Daniel exhaled, defeated. They gathered at the table, and he finally told Laura everything. His past, his work, the people after him. Laura didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply listened, face pale, jaw clenched. When he finished, she whispered, You promised. Daniel lowered his eyes. Emma reached for her mother's hand. Mom, we're in danger. Laura nodded slowly. Then we stay together. Wow, no more secrets. But the promise felt fragile, already cracking. Night settled like a warning. The three sat in silence until Daniel finally stood. I need to get you somewhere safe. Laura shook her head. Running won't fix this. Emma agreed. Dad, hiding only makes them chase harder. Daniel hesitated, torn between fear and instinct. Then a loud knock rattled the door. All three froze. The knock came again. Slow, deliberate. Daniel motioned them backward. Every muscle in his body coiled. Emma's pulse roared. Laura clutched her arm. Daniel approached the door carefully, eye at the peephole, and his face drained of color. It's him, he whispered. Emma's stomach twisted. Mark? Daniel nodded. Stay behind me. But before he could open the door, another knock came. This one on the back door. Emma's breath hitched. 2 knocks, 2 threats. Daniel's voice dropped to a terrified whisper. They found us. Daniel moved fast, faster than Emma had ever seen him. He locked the front door, then darted toward the back hallway. Laura clung to Emma's arm, her breath shaky. Daniel, what do we do? She whispered. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He was already pulling a small metal box from behind a bookshelf. Emma's pulse hammered. Are we running? Daniel shook his head sharply. No, if they wanted to storm in, they would have already. He opened the box, revealing an old phone and a small handgun. Emma swallowed hard. Dad. Daniel loaded the weapon with trembling hands. We stay together. No one opens a door. Not front, not back. The knock stopped, replaced by suffocating silence. Laura stepped closer. Is it Mark? Daniel nodded. And someone else. Someone worse. Emma felt her stomach twist. Who? Daniel hesitated, eyes darkening. Someone from before. Someone I hoped was dead. The silence didn't last. A voice called from outside. Calm, controlled, familiar. Daniel. Open the door. Daniel stiffened. Emma felt a cold shiver crawl up her spine. Mark. Daniel didn't answer. Laura mouthed. What does he want? Daniel's jaw clenched. Me. Another voice joined Mark's. One Emma didn't recognize. Smooth. Dangerous. Daniel, you know how this works. Emma's heart pounded. Who is that? Daniel didn't look at her. His name is Rylan. He was in charge. Emma swallowed. Of what? Daniel's silence was answer enough. The voice outside grew sharper. You have 10 seconds before we come in, Laura gasped. Emma grabbed Daniel's arm. We can't let them in. Daniel squeezed her hand. We want. He motioned them into the living room. Stay low. Stay quiet. As they crouched behind the couch, Emma whispered shakily. Dad, what if they break in? Daniel whispered back. Then I fight. A sudden crash shattered the silence. Laura gasped and grabbed Emma's hand. Back door. Daniel whispered. They're testing us. Emma felt the floor tremble under her knees. She peeked toward the hallway just in time to see the back doorknob twitch violently. Daniel raised the gun, ready. Then, another knock. Gentle this time, almost polite. Daniel, Mark called softly. We don't want to hurt them. Just come out. Emma's breath hitched. Mark's voice didn't match his earlier calm. There was something desperate beneath it. Daniel clenched his jaw. He's lying, he whispered. He always lies. Emma whispered, What does he want with you? Daniel's eyes didn't leave the doorway. He wants to drag me back. And he wants leverage. Emma's stomach knotted. Me! Daniel nodded once. The back door rattled again, harder this time. Daniel. Ryland's voice boomed. Last chance. Daniel steadied his aim. Stay behind me, he murmured. No matter what happens. A final slam shook the entire door, but it didn't break. Ryland growled something unintelligible from outside. Then the sound of footsteps moved away. For a moment, no one breathed. Daniel exhaled shakily. They're regrouping. Emma felt her hands trembling uncontrollably. Dad, we can't stay here. Daniel nodded. We're leaving through the side window. It's the only angle they're not watching. He motioned them toward the hall. Laura hesitated. Daniel, if they catch us, they won't, he said, though fear cracked the edges of his voice. They moved quietly, Daniel leading, Emma in the middle, Laura close behind. As Daniel pried open the window, Emma whispered, Where will we go? Daniel's jaw tightened. To the address in the letter. Emma froze. Dad, what's there? Daniel looked at her, eyes haunted. The truth I never wanted you to see. Before she could ask more, the sound of crunching gravel outside made Daniel shove them out the window. Go! They ran. Cold. Night air hit Emma like a slap as she and Laura sprinted across the neighbor's yard. Daniel just behind them. Gravel crunched beneath their feet, loud enough to expose them. But adrenaline drowned out everything else. Keep moving? Daniel hissed. Emma's lungs burned as they darted between parked cars, the shadows long and distorted under the streetlights. A voice rang out behind them. Ryland's. Daniel. You can't run forever. Daniel didn't look back. Don't stop, he growled. They reached the end of the street, breathless, when headlights flared around the corner. Emma froze, until the vehicle slowed and the window rolled down. Sophie's voice cut through the darkness. Get in. Daniel didn't hesitate. He shoved Laura and Emma inside before jumping in himself. As the car peeled away, Emma looked back. Mark and Ryland stood in the street watching them escape. Not furious, but calculating, as if the chase had only just begun. Sophie drove fast but steady, her eyes flicking between the road and the rearview mirror. Emma clutched the edge of the seat, trying to steady her breathing while Laura held her hand tightly. Daniel watched the windows like every shadow concealed a gun. Where are we going? Emma asked. Sophie didn't answer immediately. To the address your father left in the letter. It's the only safe place left. Emma's stomach nodded. Safe for who? Daniel exhaled. Safe for you, not for me. Laura turned sharply. Daniel, don't start. But Daniel's expression looked carved from guilt. They don't want you. They want me. And they want Emma as leverage. Emma shook her head. No, we're not leaving you. Sophie's voice cut through the tense quiet. You may not have a choice. Emma looked at her father, seeing fear in him she'd never imagined. The kind that comes from knowing a past you can't outrun is finally catching up. The safe house wasn't a house at all. It was an abandoned cabin in the woods, silent, except for the wind brushing through the trees. Sophie parked and cut the engine. Daniel stepped out first, scanning the dark forest like a soldier returning to a battlefield. Emma followed, hugging herself against the cold. "This place feels wrong," she whispered. Sophie nodded. "Because it's connected to everything Daniel ran from." Inside, dust coated the floorboards, but the table was cleared, like someone had been here recently. Daniel stiffened. "We're not alone." Emma's heart dropped. "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, a floorboard creaked in the back room. Laura instinctively stepped between Emma and the sound, but Daniel pushed them back gently. "Stay behind me." The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until a shadow shifted in the doorway. Emma's breath froze as a man stepped out, slow and deliberate. Rylan. Rylan smiled coldly, like someone greeting old friends at a funeral. "Daniel, I knew you'd come here." Dan raised his hand slightly, not in surrender, but in caution. "Let them go, Rylan." Rylan stepped closer, boots echoing on the wooden floor. "You had one job: disappear. But you had to build a family. You had to feel normal." His gaze drifted to Emma. "She looks like you." Emma's stomach flipped. Daniel moved instantly, blocking Rylan's view. "Don't look at her," Rylan smirked. "You don't give orders anymore." Sophie stepped sideways, positioning herself near Emma, but Rylan noticed. "And you, still playing the hero." His attention flicked to Laura. "Your wife didn't know, did she?" "Not until recently." Laura's breath hitched, but she didn't back down. Daniel's voice cracked. "Rylan, this is between you and me." Rylan's eyes sharpened. "Yes, and I need insurance." He reached into his coat, and everything exploded into motion. Rylan lunged. Daniel tackled him instantly, the two crashing onto the creaking floorboards. Emma screamed as Sophie pulled her back. Laura stumbled into the wall, hands covering her mouth. Daniel and Rylan struggled violently, fists slamming, wood cracking beneath them. Rylan managed to flip Daniel, pinning him with a forearm across his throat. "You should have stayed gone," he hissed. Daniel clawed at his grip, gasping. Emma surged forward, but Sophie grabbed her. "No!" Emma's eyes filled with panic. "Help kill him!" Sophie's voice broke. "You can't go near them!" Daniel's face reddened as he fought for air. Rylan reached for something metallic in his coat. A flash of silver. Emma felt something inside her snap. She grabbed the nearest object, a broken chair leg, and hurled it as hard as she could. It hit Rylan's shoulder. He spun toward her, eyes burning. Daniel used the moment. With a desperate surge, he threw Rylan off. But the danger wasn't over. Daniel staggered to his feet, coughing violently. Rylan wiped blood from his lip and stood, eyes blazing. "You think this ends with you winning?" He spat. Sophie moved between Rylan and the family, trembling but resolute. "Rylan, stop!" "It's over." Rylan laughed darkly. "Nothing ends until I decide." He reached inside his coat again, but this time Daniel was faster. He lunged forward, tackling Rylan into the wall. They crashed violently, splintering wood. Emma watched in horror as the struggle intensified, each man fighting like the past itself depended on the outcome. Then, a sharp crack echoed. Rylan went still. Daniel stood over him, panting, the metallic glint of the handgun in his shaking hand. Silence swallowed the room. Laura covered her mouth. Sophie exhaled shakily. Emma stepped forward. "Dad." Daniel dropped the gun, eyes full of devastation. "I never wanted you to see this," he whispered. Emma threw her arms around him. "We survived. That's what matters. But even as dawn crept through the cabin windows, Emma knew the truth. Their lives would never return to what they were.